Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey with Paul and Karine. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's watch the show and see if anything of interest comes out of my mouth.
I feel like I'm shopping with a 12-year-old. There is some concerns about Karine not being ready for the reality of being a mother.
Me conte o que há de errado.
Tell me what's wrong.
I've just been very frustrated lately with trying to keep the house clean, trying to make sure we have money, and you spend so much time in bed on social media.
Okay, so right now we are heading into a tense, potentially conflictual conversation. How do you open that conversation in a way that is the road to success? Well, he could have done a little bit better. He wasn't terrible. He's not being really awful. You know, we could imagine a worse way of opening it, like, you're a terrible person. You know, there's worse versions of him opening it up. But I would say a way to open it up that would be more likely to work out would be something like this. It would be something like, so we've been living together for a while, and you want to have kids, I want to have kids, and I just have to say that I have some concerns about the way that you live your life. You don't seem to clean very often, and you sleep a lot. And now, I'm not telling you what to do, because you're a grown woman. You can decide how you want to live your life. But I just have to say it worries me, because I worry, because I feel like I'm doing all the housework, I'm doing all the cooking, I'm doing all the shopping. And if we have a kid, I'm really worried that I'm going to have to do all the things for the kid. And, you know, it takes a village to raise a kid, and it takes both of us, you know, rising to the occasion and pulling both of our weights. And so I'm worried about that. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's my observation. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're doing half of the housework and I don't see it, because this is actually one of the things a lot of people fight about is housework. And one of the factors that will contribute is that just because you didn't see the chore being done doesn't mean it wasn't done. You know, sometimes your spouse will do chores and you didn't see him do it, like dusting the house or something. You might not notice the fact that the house is dusted because you're not paying attention. So your spouse might be doing a lot of housework and you just don't really know. So sometimes you have to be tentative even about the accusation that they're not doing a lot of housework. Now, the two of them, as far as I know, are not working, and they're living in this apartment together. So they probably do know exactly how much the other person is doing. So, I don't know, there's just other more tentative ways of opening up this conversation, and to have more eye contact, to have more love, maybe reaching out, holding onto her hand, saying, so I love you, I want this to work out, but I just want to talk about, you know, our chores situation. And let's talk about what kind of life we both want to live. Maybe I'll adjust to you. Maybe you'll adjust to me. Maybe we'll meet in the middle. Instead of the way he's opening it, which isn't terrible, but there's more effective ways to open up a conversation like this.
Sozinho e você passa muito tempo na cama nas redes sociais.
Ok.
When was the last time you did the dishes?
Quando foi a última?
So this is definitely not the way you open up this conversation. When was the last time you did the dishes? So this immediately puts her on the defensive. He probably knows that she hasn't done the dishes in a long time, if ever. And so right away, she's put in a position where she either has to admit the truth, which is, well, it's been a long time, or she has to come out swinging. Like, well, you're a mean person, you know, and immediately now you're tit for tatting and you're defending and stuff. A more effective way to open up that conversation would be the way that I said it, but if you're curious about this point, is, so I feel like I've been doing the dishes a lot, and I feel like we should be splitting up the chores. That would make me feel better. What do you think about that? You know, it's a more conducive way of opening up the conflict. Instead, he's like in sort of a dad vibe. When was the last time you did the dishes?
Uma vez que você lavou a louça.
Agora que eu e o Paul estamos vivendo juntos. Eu acho que o Paul tem dois lados. Quando ele não tá de bom humor, ele já fica com raiva, estressado e ele acaba se contando em mim. Você é a pessoa que mais bagunça a casa.
You're the one who messes the house the most.
You don't clean anything. Yeah, Karine,
So right now they're just going back and forth. She is saying, well, you're the one that always messes up the house. And he's saying, well, you never clean. So it's just getting worse. And this isn't boding well for their ability to communicate in conflict in an effective way.
one task, just to wash the dishes. That's it. But she just lays in the bed on her phone. How will she take care of a child if she can't even take care of herself?
So he says, I gave her one task. So right off the bat, you're starting from overfunctioner, underfunctioner dynamic. Right off the bat, instead of saying, hey, we both have a goal here of trying to have a good life together, having a good home. How do we want to both do this together? That gives Karine the chance to rise to the occasion. It makes her not feel like she's an underling. So, she's less likely to act like an underling. And to say to her, I gave you one task. And that's like a chore that a dad gives to a daughter. And when you treat someone like they're a daughter, they start acting like a daughter. So this is troubling. I've worked with a lot of couples with this dynamic, by the way. And it's pretty easily turned around. Under stress, they'll go back to it a lot. But it's usually when I point it out, couples will be like, oh, wow, yeah, well, I think we are doing that. And then when I propose other ways of approaching it, they will usually take to it pretty well.
If and when we have a child, are you going to help change the diapers?
Quando tivermos filho, você vai ajudar a trocar as fraldas?
Eu vou cuidar muito bem do bebê. E eu acho que você é o idiota.
I'll take good care of the baby, and I think you're an idiot.
I don't know if you got that, but the computer is saying, I will take good care of the baby and you're an idiot. So I don't know what she means by that. I think she's trying to be playful, I think. So let's see how this goes on.
Tá, que às vezes eu não limpo a casa, mas isso não significa que eu vou ser uma boa mãe. Se eu não tô pronto pra ser mãe, por que ele quer casar comigo? Isso não é legal.
Right. So similar to him saying, I need you to take a pregnancy test because you had some emojis on another guy's Instagram account. It's really an overreaction that is prone to hurt other people's feelings. So instead of saying something like, so I like to have a clean house. Everyone has their own preferences. Apparently, it's not that big of a deal to you. Can we meet in the middle here somewhere? You're taking responsibility for your feelings and you're making a request and you're allowing the other person to be who they want to be. Instead, he is saying, I don't think you're going to be a good mother. Are you going to actually clean? Are you going to actually change the diapers? When he asked that, that's a pretty big accusation. He's basically saying, I don't think you're going to be a good mother, to the point where I don't think you're even going to change the diapers. Now, maybe the accusations are accurate. We know that this couple has a lot of conflicts after this. They actually, spoiler alert, do have a child together currently, mid-2020. And maybe there are issues like that. But at this point, Paul doesn't know that. And so there's that. And I'll also say that if this overfunction or underfunction dynamic becomes more solidified, it creates the overfunctioner ends up being a jerk face because they're talking down to the other person. The underfunctioner is a jerk face because they end up rebelling as a way of trying to hold on to some dignity and some sense of self. They end up, by necessity of the dynamic, rebelling against the person, which oftentimes means being irresponsible. It's like my only way to actually eke out a self or a self-esteem or some kind of identity in response to what's happening to me is I just have to oppose what they're doing. Kids will do this, right? You'll go to your kid and you'll say, I need you to clean your room, clean your room. Now, most kids, they don't want a trashed room. Most kids want a room to be at least kind of clean, not maybe as clean as the parents want. But when you tell a kid, clean your room, and you make the kid feel hurt and you make the kid feel like they're stupid or incompetent or something, then they might be like, screw you. I'm just not going to clean my bedroom at all. This is my bedroom. You can't make me. Even though if they were left to their own devices, they probably would clean it up a little bit. maybe halfway as much as you would want, instead of just completely not doing anything. And I've worked with a lot of families where there's this dynamic and a lot of couples. So it's easy to look at Karine in this situation and say she's irresponsible, depending on your countertransference issues. It's easy to look at Paul and say that he's being domineering, depending on your countertransference issues. But really what's happening is they're both causing the problem to the other. Karine is forcing him to be domineering. Paul is forcing her to rebel against him. And I've talked about this a lot. When you see the system, it's like Neo seeing the Matrix, because we tend to look at things in an individualistic way. Like, why is that person doing that? That's a bad thing to do. No one does bad things in a vacuum, or very rarely do we. It usually develops as a result of tension and worry. What is that tension and worry? Well, there's a lot of needs that we have. We have needs for love. We have needs for independence. We have needs for respect. We have needs for cleanliness. And so when we're worried about that not happening and we can't sift through our feelings, we end up fusing our emotions with our thought processes, and we can't think straight as we navigate our way through not only our own issues, but also how to interact with other people. Another lack of differentiation issue to point out here, again, this speculation, I would have to ask them if this was accurate for them, is for Paul anyway, he is so there's two levels of differentiation that Murray Bowen laid out for us that I often describe. Is on one level the ability to differentiate between your emotions and your intellect. That's an important thing. You need to be able to know your emotions, because your emotions are important, and you also need to be able to think straight, because that's important too. And you need to be able to differentiate between the two and not mix them up. The other part of differentiation is the ability to differentiate between yourself and other people. And for Paul, he might be lacking differentiation between him and Karine, in that he has a preference for how to run the house, and he's confusing his preferences for her preferences. Maybe she doesn't want the house to be that clean. So there's all that lack of differentiation. The more differentiated you are, the more it gives a chance for conflicts to actually work out in a beneficial way.
Então você veio de longe para me tratar mal aqui?
So you came from far away to treat me poorly here.
Você acorda estressado e grita comigo.
You wake up stressed and yell at me.
Her differentiated stance would be something like, so I hear you that you want the house to be more clean. I hear you that you wish that I did more chores and that I was more active around the house. I hear you. I don't know if I want to do that, but I hear you, and it makes sense that you would want that. I don't want that, something along those lines. Instead, she comes back with, so you just came to Brazil to yell at me the whole time? And that's not going to, he's not going to hear that. He's going to be like, wait, I didn't know. Of course not. I didn't come to Brazil to yell at you. And I'm not yelling at you. I'm presenting a logical response to your weird behavior. So this is when defensiveness begets defensiveness.
I'm sorry if it seems like I'm yelling. I know I speak loudly a lot. Most of the time, I'm handling the house and all the chores myself.
Okay, so that was great. He apologized. I didn't predict that happening. So that was great for Paul to do that. He's just like, I'm sorry if you think that I'm yelling. I sometimes have a problem with that. Now, I don't know if he actually does raise his voice. He gets stern in his voice, and so he could be at fault for that. But we haven't seen him in clips raise his voice loudly. But anyway.
It's stressful. Then yes, I admit, I get very vocal with her.
Você não fala alto, você grita assim.
You do not speak loud, you scream so.
Do you want me to just leave?
Você quer que eu simplesmente vá embora?
This is not a helpful turn in the conversation. People will do this sometimes. He's asking, so you want me to just go home? Essentially, so you want to break up with me? Couples will do this sometimes, and I get where it comes from. Right now, He feels unloved, maybe. He feels like he's being treated unfairly. He's frustrated, and he's hurt, and he's looking for some reassurance that she loves him. So just ask that. Right now, I feel hurt and afraid. I don't know. Can you just reassure me that you love me, and then we can get back to this fight? Just ask for the reassurance, or reach out. Could you hold my hand because I feel really disconnected from you right now? Or could we have a hug? Or could we maybe take a break from this conversation because I feel really disconnected from you, and I don't want that to happen. There's a lot of different ways to functionally manage your feelings. Or even just say, right now I feel hurt and afraid. I don't know what to do. And then it gives the other person to rise to the occasion and come to your rescue. Instead, he says, so do you want me to go home? So it's a passive statement. It's sort of a passive aggression, but it's more of a passive statement of I'm hurt. And so for Karine now, there are two options mainly. One option is to address it literally and say, like, why are you saying that? It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Or something along the lines of, no, I don't want you to go home. But another approach would be to see through the passivity and say, oh, he's only saying that because he's hurt, and to do something to soothe him. So either, the second option is healthy, but it's asking a lot for anyone to be asked that question of, like, so you want me to go home? It's asking a lot for them to see through that passive statement, to look behind it and see a hurt person, and then to tend to that.
I don't know, Paul. Sinceramente, a gente não vai entrar em acordo se você não souber conversar. Faz o que quiser.
We will not agree if you do not know how to talk. Do what you want.
Okay, so that's a common response there too, of just like, do what you want. If you want to go home, do what you want. So she feels hurt, and she doesn't want to be vulnerable by bridging the gap and saying, no, I don't want you to go home. Instead, she's like, I don't know. And maybe she is ambivalent. I don't think she is. I don't think their relationship has deteriorated to that point. But this is a very, very common destructive conversation style. When I see this, I get real worried about people. Because when Paul asks that question of, so should I go home? He is essentially saying, a part of me wants to break up with you right now. And if you give the go-ahead, then we're done. That is very hurtful to someone to say, to just be like, because we're having this minor fight about chores, I got one foot out the door, honey. So give me the word and I'll put the other foot out the door. That's very hurtful to someone. It's very scary. Like, wait, what? You're just going to go home? We have a little bit of a conversation. And so Karine is addressing that a little bit. She's saying, we need to be able to talk about this, but, do what you want. Now, I understand where it comes from when you are very afraid and you're very distrustful because of issues in the past. It's harder to be vulnerable, and it's easier to snipe at each other in this way. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.